Hello, this is Ian Williams. I am president of the Foreign Press Association, and it is a great pleasure to have my old colleague Nina Khrushcheva to come and talk to us about the effects on Kazakhstan of Russian influence and the effects on Russia and the world of the incidents in Kazakhstan. Nina has some internal views on this. We're just discussing her grandfather's portrayal in various movies. She disapproves, both of Steve Buscemi and Bob Hoskins, with good reason, much as I enjoyed the films. But more to the point is, I was also in Kazakhstan 20 years ago, and some of the issues that we're here now. Not many people in the West know about Kazakhstan, but it's a huge area. It's as in fact, it was a British diplomat who said that Kazakhstan is a bit like Australia. It's huge, but it's hollow in the middle. You have the settlements around the outside, and the interior, there's very little there. But the interior is also stuffed with hydrocarbons, which is, of course, why it's so contentious. And just to add to the topicality, the first time I went to Kazakhstan, it happened to coincide with an official visit from the present salesman formerly called Prince Andrew, who was the British embassy touting business for Britain, which was deeply involved in the gas and oil industries there. So there are many factors at stake here. I saw railway loads coming from China, trucks going to and from China, and the Russian influences there. When I went, I think this altered then, but absolutely, a majority of the population of Kazakhstan actually spoke Russian. They might have been Ukrainian or Tatar or Korean, but the Russian speakers were in control. Well, not in control, they were in a majority. And the interesting part was that they deferred to the Kazakhs. As far as I can see, there's been no signs of Russian nationalist activity. Both the locals and Putin decided that Kazakhstan belongs to the Kazakhs, and they were very happy to leave all the political positions to the local ethnic Kazakhs. And understand underneath all of this, what people explained to me at the time as I was examining corruption in the oil industry, was that the Soviets had always had the difficulty, is that the names gave no clue. They would see two people with entirely different names and wouldn't realize they were both members of the same horde or the same clan, and that there were networks of nepotism which were built up. And that's been brought out in some of the Al Jazeera coverage this week, I think, on that. But nobody wants, this situation is too complex for simplistic solutions. And I'm pleased to say that Nina's recent article showed that she is not into simplistic solutions and too broad brushstrokes. So from a Russian point of view, what is Kazakhstan? And, you know, is it an ally? Is it an ex-colony? Is it the near abroad? How important is it to Moscow's policies, Nina?
Hi, Ian. Thank you very much for inviting me. It has been some years that you and I met, so very good to see you, and thank you, those who joined. I am not a Kazakh scholar in any sense, and actually there are very few of those, and that's why I think there's so much confusion going on, because very few people know exactly what is going on. What are those clans are doing? Is it President Tokayev is fighting with the former President Nazarbayev clans, and so on and so forth. I think what it really showed, it seems to me, I don't know if I need to go into details of what happened, and how it happened, because there are various schools of thought of what happened there. But so far, it seemed that it was indeed the economic discontent over the gas prices in some parts of Kazakhstan. So they tripled, I think, and certainly doubled in some areas. Then they turned very quickly, because the government didn't act quickly, and so this demands turned quickly into political demands, and the demands were the main one: old man go away, which is President Nazarbayev, who was president probably when you were, I mean, not probably, when you were there.
He was, yes.
He was there because he has been there for 30 years. In fact, he was the, when Mikhail Gorbachev with his perestroika, he said, well, we are going to give republics as much freedom and they can make decisions. But of course, the Soviet Union would always put a Russian man on top of Kazakhstan. And in the late 80s, there were giant protests about it. And so then they picked Nazarbayev, who was already a very distinguished member of the Soviet Communist Party. He became the president, and sort of then he inherited the job. I mean, he became he became the first secretary of the Kazakh Communist Party, and then he sort of, as happened in many different parts of the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, after the collapse in '91, that just became president and went on for all those years. And he was quite successful in kind of keeping the clans happy, keeping the oil and gas industry in his family's hands, but not necessarily taking everything. But once you stay on for 30 years, by the way, a good lesson to Putin, actually horrible lesson to Putin because it's horrible for us. Now, then it becomes an ossified system. And so all this wealth that Kazakhstan was able to create, and originally Nazarbayev was popular enough because he was giving it to variety of kind of popular or population groups.
He was giving some of it to them. He kept quite a lot.
Getting some of it, right. But now it really, because the system is so ossified and there's so many people wanting it, that that it's now really trickling down. And that's what people went against. And they went against the kind of what they call, or we call dvoyevlastie, which is the double power, because Nazarbayev went away in 2019, and he became, his official title was the father of the nation. So there was a president and the father of the nation, and basically most businesses belong to the clans of the father of the nation. So that made President Tokayev is a very secondary figure. He, as you may remember, was a diplomat. He was very soft-spoken. You mentioned that they spoke Russian then 20 years ago. Most of his addresses, at least the ones that I heard of Tokayev's addresses to his people, were in Russian. They were not in Kazakh. It's about 19 million population country, and I think about 3.5 or 4 million is the Russian, but still sort of the lingua franca of the whole area.
When I was there, the government officials all had a teach yourself Kazakh book on their desk.
Exactly.
Because none of them spoke Kazakh, but it was necessary for promotion and for public appearance. So they were all learning it as they went.
Right. And now now they do speak Kazakh, but I also thought it was important, since we talk about the role of Russia and the role of Putin, it's important that he spoke Russian, because his message was also, because Nazarbayev, of course, had a wonderful relationship with Putin. He was able to keep his independence. That's why actually when Ian and I exchanged, kind of, we talk about whether we would do it and how we would do it. And I kind of always, and I kept kind of bristling at the fact that most Western press was writing that he's a pro-Kremlin president, both Nazarbayev and then Tokayev. Like, this is not the case at all. They are friendly with the Kremlin, but that actually made Kazakhstan so different from other Central Asian republics, but also many other republics, because they've been able to, you mentioned Prince Andrew, so they were able to have all this oil gas relationship with Western countries, with the United States. I think it's about 350 billion investment in it. China, which was friendly with Nazarbayev, but actually the people of Kazakhstan was much more concerned about China's influence rather than the Russian influence, because the Russian Empire, we know in a way, I mean, they know, but the Chinese were the original muscle and the original force that they don't want to be under. Actually, one of the reasons that Tokayev, when it became clear that he is losing his power, he immediately went to this security cooperation of the five former Soviet republics, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Russia, and Belarus. He went ask for their help. And of course, you know, the Kremlin, of course, is mostly in charge of it, precisely because then the possibility would be that China comes in and it becomes the appendix of China, which of course he would not want. And one of the things, so the Russian language was important, that he was able also mobilize the Russians to come in very quickly. It took 5 days. And then in 5 days they're gone, which of course nobody thought they would.
Unprecedented.
Right. Anthony Blinken, very, by the way, kind of bad diplomacy, I must say. It was ridiculous when negotiations are going on. He's having all this side slides at Russia. But anyway, he said that, you know, when Russians come in, they tend not to leave. So they did leave. And so the political protests became very quickly was taken over by, we still don't know exactly which forces are that, but most analysts who know Kazakhstan say that when it became clear, it was already getting clear that Tokayev is going to give up Nazarbayev in order to keep his own power, then they jumped on the protests to, in fact, take down the president. And that's why Almaty, which is, it's called the second capital, was originally the capital, was hurt so much. It was hurt so much, once again, a speculation, but probably, as I've read and talked to a variety of people, because Almaty was basically owned by very many Nazarbayev relatives or friends. And they are the ones who were basically, the idea was to take down Almaty, the most important city, except for the capital, but the most important city culturally, and then drive Tokayev out. So he outsmarted them. He outsmarted those clans. And this is, you know, I'm sure, Ian, you've experienced that. You were working on their corruption. By now, it was 20 years ago. By now, people in this in the north and especially in the south of Kazakhstan, they have their own armies. I mean, all these relatives of it's almost like Ramzan Kadyrov in Chechnya. They have their own armies because you know, they need to protect their oil wells, or they need to make sure that factory works just for them, and so on and so forth. So these are the people, seems to me, or seems to experts, went in and tried to kind of influence right on the social protests. Then, of course, when in order for Tokayev to call those Russian and other troops in agreement, it has to be foreign threat. It's like NATO, it has to be foreign threat. I don't know if you remember, or because it was not much discussed, just said that there was a post-Soviet enterprise, the security cooperation enterprise. It was created actually not even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, officially created in 2009. When NATO, and we then can go to talk about Ukraine, when NATO became clear that NATO is expanding and expanding and expanding, then the Kremlin decided to create its own security cooperation enterprise, just in case. It never functioned before. It was sort of a nothing on paper. And suddenly it just went out and did what it was supposed to do. It was all very, I don't know if you saw the footage, how they were all leaving. It was incredibly ceremonial. Everybody was under their own flag. How many planes for the Russian troops, how many planes for the Belarusian troops, and so on and so forth. So it was all very well performed. But it was, you know, it was kind of, strong enough, even as an idea, for them to be there, because I don't think, I mean, there's no reports that they were performing any military operations. They were just guarding the buildings that the Kazakh forces were not able to secure, but then the Kazakh forces were doing the killing, which still don't know how many. We know that they arrested almost 10,000 people. There was one information that 160 people were killed, but we once again have no idea whether it's true, how many, because then it was retracted in so on.
This also raises the question of the dog that didn't bark, because we have the organization with Belarus and the other close allies to Moscow, but also as part of its counter against NATO and the US, Putin started the Shanghai Cooperation Council. And this is one of the points, the complete absence of Chinese physical presence, even though they gave verbal and rhetorical support to Tokayev.
And I actually think that's why Tokayev did it, because from little that I know, talking to people there, he basically, when his power I would assume there's a Nazarbayev supporter, Nazarbayev family that they were afraid to lose, and so they wanted to take down Tokayev, and so then Nazarbayev comes in and appoints another president, something like that. And so, but Tokayev had, his choices were either, because a lot of Nazarbayev relatives, especially is in Afghanistan, they are, what is this, Salafites, right? How you pronounce it? Salafis.
Salafis, is it?
Salafis, exactly. They're Salafis. And so the the options were not many. So it's either perhaps fundamentalist Muslim now country then, which was always very secular, or the Chinese.
And what's one of the things I discovered with the Muslims in Kazakhstan, it was a very sort of Episcopalian.
Exactly.
they were nominally Muslim, but let's go for a drink and talk about it.
But also actually, but in the South, particularly from where supposedly those bandits came from, it's already very Muslim. And in fact, women cover their faces already, which for many Kazakhstanis, and I was talking to friends there, journalists, they said they are traumatized by this, because it was always a country that was quite free from any fundamentalist expression. So that were his choices. So the last thing I want to say here is that those foreign battalions that they were talking about, the 20,000 people, we don't know how many, but suddenly there were 6 attacks on Kazakhstan, as Tokayev was saying to us. And so this is kind of an interesting thing. I think that's important for our kind of understanding of the future, how this part of the world, including Russia, is going to function. We saw it in Belarus already. So every threat to power becomes a foreign threat. So
this goes right back to Stalin in the 30s, where if you have the perfect society, how can you have dissent? There must be foreigners causing trouble.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it's actually it's not even Stalin in the 30s. I mean, it was Lenin. I mean, Lenin was the one who was talking about the class struggle, and they are interfering in our way of life and whatnot. And Putin has done this whole thing. I mean, been here for a year and a half. When I came here, there was about, I don't know, maybe 20 foreign agents. Or
we should explain. I don't think we did that. You are actually in Moscow at the moment, aren't you?
I am in Moscow. Yes, it's very dark here, as you could see. 7:20, and so now it's over 100, I think, I don't remember exactly, I think 100 journalists and 365 organizations and something like that. So it's always basically the threat now, the threat from within comes from not within. And in fact, when Putin gave his, at the end of the year, annual press conference, or whatever you want to call it, for answering questions for 4.5 hours, he was saying very kind of deliberately and very firmly that Russia cannot be invaded, it cannot be taken by foreign powers, but it can be destroyed from within, and we'll never allow that. And so, of course, a week later, Tokayev would go through the same experience. And of course, Tokayev would announce that all these bandits train either in the West or train in Afghanistan or train wherever. And he and the security organization of these 5 former Soviet republics are fighting with it. So this is, we think, what happened, but also is important. So he won brilliantly in a way the tactical round, the first round. It would be very difficult for him to keep, and that's where our conversation about the future may come in. It would be difficult, very difficult for him to keep the power or to keep it stable, because essentially he ousted Nazarbayev. We still don't know what Nazarbayev is. I think his press secretary said that he's in Nursultan, which is the capital named after him, the capital of Kazakhstan. And Alexander Lukashenko, the Belarusian strongman, said that he talked to him, but Putin doesn't know where he is. I mean, Putin almost openly said that I haven't talked to him. I only talked to the president, President Tokayev, because
a cynic would say he's in the bank vault of a Swiss bank counting his ill-gotten gains, but well, obviously he's still in the country.
Well, no, some experts say that he's in China, and the reason that whole thing happened is because he's very sick, apparently, or, I mean, I saw him because he was in, he was just meeting at the end of the year and meeting with Putin and meeting with everybody, and he looked fine. But then suddenly, apparently, he went to China to get some health issues resolved, and then it just immediately blew up, and he himself supposedly is in China, and we don't know whether he's coming back, but his family is there. So the family is not going to give Tokayev a free hand in doing all the reforms that he already announced. Interesting, he actually announced that he will do everything that the people ask him to do. That is the people. Well, I mean, they now going to be, all the rich people need to have a fund for the people of Kazakhstan. They need to contribute. Then they are going to cap the gas and oil prices and so on and so forth. So he was able to do, I mean, quite impressively, he was able to do all these things quickly. The question is how strategically that can work out for him. And a big question for us, the Russians, and maybe for the world, because basically the world is more interested in Putin than in anything else, I think, that what is Putin going to claim for that assistance and for getting out that quickly and making Tokayev look brilliantly?
Well, I mean, this is one of the things Nazarbayev always reminded me of Prince Sihanouk in Cambodia, in the sense of balancing all of the different forces and playing off one against the other, being friendly with everyone, provoking nobody, until Henry Kissinger came and blew up this nice arrangement. Yeah. So it didn't end well for Cambodia. But the Nazarbayev was doing this internally as well, because he was balancing the various, the interest of the various hordes and the various clans, and making sure that everybody got a little bit. And, obviously Tokayev failed in this, or maybe it was just that Nazarbayev's friends and relatives were just so greedy that they didn't want to give up anything to the others. Do you have any feeling on that? Well,
yes, and that's basically what happened. That's what I was told happened. Is most of that started in the north. I mean, I don't know the country, but that's what we know. It started in the north because that's where a lot of those gas refineries or gas producing plants are, and also a lot of oil, but they are not part of the either they're not part of the official system, or the official system didn't let them become part of it, because the official is already taken by all the Nazarbayev people. And so that's where the uprisal began. And then it kind of spread quickly, because Tokayev probably, like all of them, I mean, you need to be Lukashenko, who immediately starts kicking people in the head. Although actually, even with Lukashenko, I think it took a week before they realized that it's not going to go away, and therefore they need to do something. So it was the same thing. I mean, the prices went down to where it was, the gas prices, but only in one region where this whole thing began, but not in other regions. So in 2 days, in 1 day, they then added a few more regions. But by, I think, January 3rd or even 2nd, it already, January 4th, it already went out of control. And that when became clear, and that's when those Nazarbayev forces, Nazarbayev connected forces, or without not saying that he was organizing it, that's then.
Well, his relatives were actually in charge of significant sections of the security forces, weren't they?
Well, exactly, and that's why I think, it almost seems that this guy, Karim Masimov, who I'm sure I don't know if you already encountered him then, or he's a later edition, but he had many different, he was the closest to Nazarbayev, and he, at the time when it all happened, he was in charge of security ministry, but before he was the prime minister, so he was a very close Nazarbayev man, and now he's being accused of treason, as always, they always do. In fact, even those who in the West are deemed democratic or more democratic than other places. For example, current President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine accused former President Petro Poroshenko of treason, the same thing that current president of Georgia accused the previous president of treason. And so it's a kind of, it's very much our part of the world.
Because the old English saying that treason doth rarely prosper, because if it succeeds, you don't call it treason.
But before it succeeded, you can call anything treason. I mean, everything becomes treason. So he's accused of treason, and one of the school of thoughts is the reason they're not, and his ministry, some people in his ministry, is because Tokayev really can't, at least at this moment, can't fight with the whole Nazarbayev clan or clans of people, and therefore he just picked somebody he can blame all of it on without touching others. And also there may be some treason, because it is interesting that in Alma-Ata suddenly it was a very heavily, or obviously guarded place, as a lot of places in the former Soviet Union are, in countries of the former Soviet states. And suddenly every single relevant government building got no security whatsoever. That's why every building was burned. So we don't know that, and probably would never know, because now when Tokayev is in charge of everything, it's going to be his story. Who came in, who was in charge, who was not in charge, who is a treasonous, who is guilty, how many people are killed. I don't know if he would ever find out, or we will be allowed to find out, and so on and so forth. But so far, this is the man to pay for all this havoc that happened, and probably over some days we will find out more. Maybe there will more people be implicated. But Tokayev already said that Alma-Ata should be restored, I think, in 8 months. So I would imagine there would be a lot of Russian builders and companies doing this or helping.
And Tokayev family contractors coming in.
And contractors coming in, exactly. I mean,
So,
there's also Turkey, and Turkey has a role in it somehow.
Turkey's always been very big in Central Asia. It's got the contractors, and they've had a lot of, not as much influence as they'd like with the sort of pan-Turkism, but they've had a significant, they built a mosque there when I was there, I think.
Yep.
Or some of them did, at least. And I presume building mosques is something that Erdogan would be quite fond of and support. But so geopolitically, here we have, the game has been played, all the pieces are back at the starting place where they were. But obviously, everything has changed. I mean, geopolitically, this is in the fulcrum. It's the core of the great game in a way. In the old days, it's the sort of pivot between China and Russia and the West and many other places. So does it have further implications in the sense of, will Kazakhstan be able to go back to being independent now that Moscow has shown its how essential it is to the survival of whoever wants to be president? Well,
I mean, we don't know Tokayev. I mean, he was completely a man with no face until recently, and now suddenly he just showed that he has a jaw and he has a voice and he can speak and make very quick decisions.
Reminds me of a former Secretary General of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union who was obscure until the time came.
There you go. Exactly. No, it's true. Until the time came, and suddenly they're just more important than anything.
Who's this Stalin guy? Who does he think he is?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think we have an answer to this yet, but I do think that strategically would be very difficult for him because he now has to be very careful, more careful with China even than Nazarbayev was, because China smells weakness like no Russia even does. Then Turkey, and Turkey went out, I forgot which minister, but somebody important came out and said the same thing as Blinken said. I mean, you can expect the slight or kind of an insult from Blinken. Well, actually, we shouldn't expect, but he's good at that. But we shouldn't really be, at least Russians feel like Turkey is an ally, so shouldn't be questioning their presence there. But also Turkey, as you said, I mean, it wants its own piece of the pie there as well now, and probably feel like with Tokayev they can have an opportunity to have more influence rather than less. And of course, as we know with Putin, always he's very good that way. If you ask him for a favor, I mean, one of the things that Barack Obama did in 2013, remember there was a red line in Syria with chemical weapons, and he asked Putin for a favor to fix it, and Putin sort of fixed it for a second, and then what happened afterwards. So when you ask Putin for a favor, he's going to come calling. And you never know which way he's going to come calling and how and what are you supposed to give him. And so I think that piece of the pie of the puzzle is still very unclear. But I think every piece of the puzzle right there is unclear because Tokayev wants a stable country. I think it would be much more difficult for him to be a stable country the way Nazarbayev's country was. Also because he announced all this amazing political reforms that should happen very quickly, as he said. But this is a Central Asian country. I mean, show me a Central Asian country that reforms and reforms quickly. I mean, Kazakhstan in many ways was a very, as you know, traveling around there is almost an oxymoron in terms in that area because Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, all the others, they had their wars, their upheavals, they have revolutions, they take down governments and whatnot, but Kazakhstan was stable.
Kazakhstan, when I was there, and I think from my following of it since then, was very good at preserving the appearances and the appearances, the cosmetics
absolutely
of a modern democratic state. As long as the money went in the right places, they were quite happy to have parliaments, to allow some newspapers. They weren't overly repressive. And as far as I could see, Nazarbayev invented what I called secondary looting. The other people looted directly from the country. He diverted the money before it got to the country.
Yeah,
I remember one gas contract was paid into a Swiss bank account in his name for 700 million. And he said it was for safekeeping during currency, but it was his personal account in Switzerland that he put the money into. And of course, he carried on doing it.
It's a very good way of putting it, the secondary looting. It's brilliant. And it also applies not just to Kazakhstan, to a lot of other places. So we'll see what happens, but it's something that, going back to Putin, something he loves the most, that kind of 19th century geopolitical game when you move pieces and you stun the opponent, but then you embrace the opponent, and the way they do. That Erdogan and Putin are just brilliant together because it's one is Sultan and another one is a Tsar, and they kind of do this very traditional dance, like, oh, I'm on top. No, I'm on top. Erdogan was visiting Russia, I forgot when, just recently, and they were counting. It was amazing because they were counting antibodies, the COVID antibodies, and Erdogan had more. It was almost like they were measuring their manhood. It was ridiculous. And Erdogan said, well, I have more, and you, Putin, you should really take care of your antibodies. Like, whoa, what the hell is going on? So it is, I mean, this, as they would say in the 19th century, the game is afoot.
If any of our visitors would like to put in questions, could you please put them into the chat or on the Q&A, and we will see what we're going to do. Because you know, I hope there's people there with some expertise here. We have a Kazakh clan expert or expert on the hordes, then please do chip in and either add your expertise or put in a question on angles that we've missed so far. And the main one is, how does this affect US and Russian relations? In the sense, you've already said that Blinken has continued the great Washington tradition of needlessly insulting the Russians and then wondering why they're upset afterwards. Right. You don't have to be a fan of Putin to think that he is. The Russians have got some good cause for thinking they were that Washington was throwing stuff at them, and not least the economic advisors that destroyed the economy.
Well, I mean, also, I mean, for Putin, I think this whole discussion that happened this week, the three discussions, they were really not about, for Putin, they were not really about Ukraine. They were about kind of, stop putting me at a children's table next to the toilet. Are you going to take me seriously one time? I mean, what do I need to do? What do I need to shoot and blow up? So it is, he loves it. I mean, the game is afoot. For him, it's all going to be who is going to outsmart whom at what point. But I think with Kazakhstan, in fact, it does, and Tokayev so far showed kind of partiality and gratitude to Putin, including speaking Russian, and Putin also saying that I'm in contact with President Tokayev at all times, that Putin is big on spheres of influence. I mean, unlike Victoria Nuland, I don't believe that he wants to recreate the Soviet Union just because it's way too simple and kind of ridiculous, because it's not, it really is not possible. But he likes imperial influence. It's not that, it doesn't necessarily mean he wants the empire back, but he wants the relationship of that kind, you know, and who doesn't?
It's one of the things that when I was there, the State Department had done a survey on all of the stands. And apart from Uzbekistan, where anyone answered the question the wrong way would face consequences, most of the populations in the former stands actually expressed serious nostalgia for the Soviet Union. They didn't think the Soviet Union should have dissolved. They wanted the independence. They thought the things had improved. But of course, you know, this was not a planned landing. This was a crash landing from Yeltsin. He was a drunken driver. He crashed the Soviet Union. Absolutely. He didn't take it to the roadside and say, let's check the bits. So they were all, people were abandoned. Russians were abandoned in the stands. People from Central Asia were abandoned in Moscow, treated as foreigners all of a sudden. There were factories producing tires for cars made in Ukraine, in Kazakhstan, I think it was. So the whole supply chain was ruined. It was a serious crash landing. And I don't know, I haven't seen any surveys, but I never saw the Kazakhs as being inherently anti-Russian, much less so than the Uzbeks, for example, as a general rule.
Well, I mean, it also, as I said, not an expert, but they could be. And I think originally after the Kazakhstan became independent and Nazarbayev was in charge and was very firm, Russians didn't have a happy time there, as they didn't have in any republics, because, and I can imagine that. I mean, when I moved to the United States in '91, I didn't have a happy time either, because every American would tell me that, oh, we won the Cold War, how do you feel about it? And great, well, thank you for insulting me every moment, that Khrushchev was wrong in the kitchen debates when they had this debate with Nixon, who is going to live under which system, communism and capitalism. And so every American would remind me that Nixon was right and I am now in capitalism. So yes, and I totally get it. And actually Nazarbayev was rather firm in trying to keep nationalism at bay, so to speak. Although I think in recent years it got less and less nationalism than it was originally, which, as I said, I totally understand. I mean, because we were the center of an empire, and if empire collapses, whether it wanted or not, of course it's going to be.
It was very clever in Kazakhstan. As far as I can tell, the top job was held by a Kazakh, but the deputy who actually did all the work was a Russian, or a Soviet. So it was sort of managed, just like. And the Kazakhs, as we said, have continued that cosmetic tradition since then of disguising who actually has the power. We're being asked, are you fairly certain that the Allied troops, the Russian and the Allies, have actually left Kazakhstan or will completely leave?
Well, that great question. We've seen they march into the planes. We were told how many planes left for which country. But once again, as I said, I mean, the story is going to be told by Tokayev. So whatever the story is going to be that what we're told. And since there's going to be no investigation and no, I mean, clearly most of the websites, I mean, there was a wonderful website functioning, kind of immigrant website, but it was functioning all over, Fergana. And now it's closed because they were asking all the questions that we're asking. How many people are killed? When did they start being killed? Why the security forces abandoned Almaty? Why did they allow all these bandits to come in? So there was no bandits in Kazakhstan before. Suddenly there are 20,000. Where did they come from? I mean, it
almost has shades of the Capitol Hill. Who allowed all those people to storm the Capitol Hill? Anyone would suspect that the security forces were at least indecisive about their defense of the area.
Exactly. I mean, it's so, so basically, it does have all this kind of the palace coup trademark as they develop. So no, we really don't know. But I would imagine that if there is a lie, it's not a very giant one. So if somebody's left there, it's not. And
they can come back very quickly.
And they can, exactly. And now we've seen it. And I actually think that's another part of sort of Putin's game, is to show that if we need to, we can go and we will be so disciplined, you wouldn't even notice how we come in and how we get out. And so I think that kind of to your earlier point, how it plays out in kind of a larger geopolitical area. So Putin gets potentially another part of his sphere of influence. And
we should mention, just because it hasn't been mentioned and it's a big issue, is that the Russian space effort is based in Kazakhstan at Baikonur in the Cosmodrome.
Right.
So it's almost extraterritorial. All of their rockets, all the people going to the International Space Station on a Russian rocket, which is what most of them have been going lately, until private enterprise took over, have been going from the Nazarbayev private enterprise in Baikonur.
Right. And they actually, and the first thing that the Russians, and even Tokayev, one of the first things he said to Putin is that Baikonur is being guarded. And Baikonur is actually being guarded by their own troops. I mean, it is being guarded anyway by the Russians. But yes, I mean, there was a lot of things that could have gone horribly wrong. A lot of things did go horribly wrong, but so far they didn't go horribly wrong for Tokayev. And if he does manage to do at least some of the reforms that he promised, it may not be such a bad thing. But I mean, that system, as you know, you've seen it, Ian, and other people, I'm sure, who covered.
Well, and anything that gets Nazarbayev's hand out of the till is not a bad thing in itself.
Right. Well, but also,
incremental progress.
But at the same time, Tokayev would have to create his own system, because he cannot. I mean, Nazarbayev was personal power. I mean, it was a country, but it was a personal power. It was his own personal arrangement of his own country. So Tokayev cannot rule that country because it was a Nazarbayev system. So he needs to create his own. Does he have enough effort? I mean, does he have enough resources? Does he have enough people who are actually loyal to him? Because one of the reasons he had to call the the security people, I mean, for the security organization people, is because he didn't have his own people to trust in the security, Kazakh security forces. So the question is how quickly and how well he can create some other Tokayev system. The fact that it's going to be personal power, probably, because most countries are personal power in that part of the world. But Putin already held talks with the Tajik president, talking about how we can protect the border. And now suddenly we're talking about a common border with Afghanistan. Sounds familiar, because that's when 1979 happened, when suddenly the Soviet troops had to go into Afghanistan to protect their border. So how we're going to protect that border. So he does expand his sphere of influence in a way. And in some way for him, that's a message to the West too. It's like, fine, you know, you want to scream at me with Ukraine. I have this whole Asia now being taken care of.
Our old friend Stephen Schlesinger raised the question that's bubbling around.
Is Stephen here? Hi, Stephen.
Yes. Nina says hi, Stephen. With Putin facing upheavals throughout these various spheres of influence, what will he now do about Ukraine? I mean, does success in flexing muscles in one part of the near abroad affect his decisions on the rest of the near abroad, whether, you know, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, and other places in the vicinity?
Well, I mean, as you know, Armenia and Azerbaijan, he actually doesn't get involved that much. In fact, Armenia asked him before for to use the security cooperation in their fights with Azerbaijan, and the Russian response was, it's your own, you know, kind of your local territory.
We don't have a dog in this fight.
Right, like, they're not going because there's really no external threat, so we can't go in. Technically, we can't go in. But also, Stephen, I am not, I don't know if I've written about this, I'm not in the school of thought that Putin plans to invade Ukraine. I mean, I know it's a very simple line because it explains a lot of brouhaha in Washington, and Victoria Nuland can show that she really knows her stuff. And it's a payback for all the things she was unable to do in 2014. But it's really not, as I said, it's not about Ukraine. It really is about, we've been asking you, everybody forgot, I mean, I don't know if everybody forgot, but few people remember that, remember the Munich speech in 2007 when Putin said it's a multipolar world and America still behaves like it is only superpower and so on and so forth. It happened exactly when George Bush announced the missile shield. As you remember, they withdrew from the old Soviet treaty, and George Bush announced the missile shield. They were going to put troops in Poland and put troops in the Czech Republic, and it was supposed to be, I mean, it probably was, against Iran. And everybody was saying to George Bush that Russians would take it personally. It's like, who are those Russians? Why would they take these things personally? Of course he did. And from then on, that was, I think, was not even so much the NATO expansion, but from then on, we see Putin moving towards what's happening now. Then there was I think it was Valdai's speech in 2014, a very similar, is that you're not listening to us, we have to take security, our own security on hands, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's about re-invading Ukraine. I mean, I want to repeat it, and I said it numerous times. Putin is not an idiot. I mean, I know he's very simplistically presented in especially in American press, but he's not an idiot. Just imagine the 40 million population of Ukraine that hates his guts. They go into Kiev and do what there? I mean, what then the whole Russian nation should be mobilized to be soldiers. I will be mobilized to be soldiers in Ukraine to keep that population in order. So it's not about invading Ukraine. It is about making a point. And actually, I want to send you, Stephen, to I think it's either this Foreign Affairs or last Foreign Affairs, I'm not sure, don't remember. There was an article by Dmitry Trenin from the Carnegie Moscow Center, who explains it very, very well. I mean, he's explains Putin. He's not critical of Putin the way I would be, but I do take his argument that, and what Lavrov, the foreign minister today, Sergey Lavrov, gave a giant press conference, a little whiny, I must add, sort of, well, poor Russians, we're always being disrespected. But some things he said that needs to be kind of paid attention to. He
That's
said,
been consistent. I mean, I frequently spoke to Sergey Lavrov when he was the permanent representative at the United Nations.
All right, you were there then. Right.
It was palpable, and he often expressed the resentment at the disrespect shown by the US. We try to cooperate with them, but they scorn our efforts. We try to agree with them and go along with them, and they scorn our efforts. Right. So, there is a definite arrogance from Washington, which certainly annoyed Lavrov, and I'm sure it annoyed Putin and the other people in Moscow as well. And that seems to be continuing. And
that's why I actually brought this old missile shield, because in America we have 15 minutes of memory. We don't remember what happened before, but here people remember. I mean, they really remember how we tried this and then it didn't work, and then it didn't work, and then it didn't work. And this is to say that Russia, for such a giant country, which is 11 times those, it's a little way too touchy-feely. I must say, if you're such an empire, don't be such a wuss, but here it is. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. So I think it is more about making his point. It is possible that, well, we don't know, but possible that with Ukraine, he slightly overplayed his hand, because stationing those troops, we saw already Bob Menendez saying, well, we have all the sanctions now that we want, and I don't think we should even wait until Ukraine is invaded. Just if they don't go to their barracks, just let's do it. Which may happen, because, things happen. But we'll see. I mean, I think it's still in the very kind of conversational place. But I really don't think that that Putin is that stupid to go. And just even if you remember, and I mean, I'm so glad, Ian, that kind of you're here, because you remember all these things and covering this places. By the way, with Lavrov, John Bolton was the US representative, and he was insulting
arrogance is us.
Right. He was like, who are you? Oh, those other countries. We're we do whatever we want. That's actually how Lavrov actually became anti-American in a way, because I just saw it in him changing from being a great proponent of
Russia cooperated during the first Iraq war,
right,
in defense of UN resolutions, and got nothing for it. And it offered cooperation on other things under its own terms. But, I'm certainly no fan of Putin and the system. And they do pick the worst friends. I mean, Syria, Saddam Hussein, the list of Moscow's friends is a rogues gallery for anywhere else in the world, whether you're American or not.
But the thing is, I mean, not that, once again, not in defense of Putin in any way, but kind of try to explain that from the Russian standpoint, they have a point, is that he tried. I mean, remember in 2000 when Putin became president, he went to his first, I mean, it's always very important, what is the first country you go to, right? Anybody remembers? He went to England. He went to England 4 times that year. That was his friend. Tony Blair was his friend. He went.
Some might say. Enough said, some of us might say.
Well, but I mean,
jaundiced memories of Tony Blair.
Of course, but it is. I mean, it's still not Kim Jong-un. So let's just.
Sure. Well, I mean, he saw in Tony Blair an interlocutor who was prepared to accept his point of view, was not going to bang his head with ideology, and was prepared to talk business, literally, in the case of Blair.
Same thing was Gerhard Schroeder when Schroeder was a chancellor. So the way Putin sees it is that he tried. I mean, he tried to be friends with Bush, and then in 2006, Dick Cheney goes to Lithuania and says, Putin, you are not a Democrat. And Putin says, I'm sorry, Dick Cheney, you are just the greatest of all of them. So it's the way they see it is that they've tried all these efforts. So once again, Ukraine, they're just going to stand there until something happens or they get something. Or
it is dangerous. There's a Sarajevo element here, though, isn't there? Because he's got these troops on the border, and it's like the timetables in 1914. He either stands down, which looks like a bit of a defeat, or he uses them, and there's accidents will happen.
I don't think they're going to use them. I think they're going to keep whatever it is they kept from the spring, and then they would move them. Because it's Putin. I mean, another thing is that we have to remember that Putin doesn't do things straightforwardly. He warns us that he's going to do them, but we never read it correctly. But when he has troops on the border, those troops don't go. Those troops are there for show. And somewhere else, remember when he did the, this white vans that were going to Donetsk and Lugansk. What are they? The Red Cross, but they're not Red Cross. What's the name of this? The help, whatever. I forgot the name of it. When the trucks with help would go painted with white. What is the name of it in English? How you call it in English?
Aid supply.
The aid something or other, the charity work. So you would have tanks going one direction, and that's how he does it. So I would imagine that probably the troops will station in Belarus, because Lukashenko already said, bring everything, and they would start exercises there, something like that, something that will take attention away. So Putin is still going to be a very formidable opponent to Antony Blinken, I must say, and he's not going to insult him away. That is going to continue. But one thing that is horrible to us, it's almost personal, but also societal in Russia, is that the Russians were looking at the Nazarbayev way of doing things. That is, you go away and you become father of the nation and somebody else deals with everything.
So you're hoping Putin would get kicked upstairs to his dacha and count his money.
He was looking at it, and now that's it, which means now Putin is going to be there forever because he can't leave. He now officially can't leave because things can happen and he's not going to let it happen. So we probably all going to die before him.
Well, we've got just one plaudit from Arlene Schutz. Says to the panelists, I'm not very familiar with the politics of the region, but I've met people from Ukraine and Kazakhstan and noticed they agree with you. So we're being validated by an online poll.
Good. I'm glad.
So we're coming to the end now, and this is Ian Williams with the Foreign Press Association. We've had a very timely discussion on Kazakhstan. We got it in just as the crisis boiled down, but it's still relevant, I'm pleased to say. And we hope to have more discussions of this, the type of reasoned and rational, non-partisan commentary that we've just had from Nina Khrushcheva here. And, I did ask her beforehand whether she preferred Steve Buscemi or Bob Hoskins as portrayal of her grandfather, and she very firmly said neither, for very good reasons. I like them both, but I mean, that was as an acting, that was a dramatic.
You're not related. You're not related. So.
It wasn't my granddad being insulted. So look, thank you very much, Nina. We hope to have you again soon, and please let us know if you've got a paper coming up that you want to explain to the foreign and domestic press here in New York. And to everybody else, thank you very much. Please sign on, join the Foreign Press Association, sign on for our future briefings. We have a program coming. This was rushed because of events, but we have a program, a lot more coming in the new year. And they will all be equally sparkling and fascinating, I'm sure. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.